thank you for coming on this rainy day to Windward. Thank you for supporting Out Loud in the Library. This is our program between the language arts and the library that's supporting literature and art. Today we have a little bit of everything. It's kind of a mixed plate. So this is from Bamboo Ridge. So I want to introduce Donald Carrera Ching, and he will introduce the others. But our first writer is Donald Carrera Ching. He was born and raised in Ka'alu on the island of Oahu. He earned his PhD in English from the University of Hawaii, so Dr. Donald. And his debut novel, Between Sky and Sea, A Family Struggle, was published by Bamboo Ridge in 2015 and was awarded the Ka Pala Pala Po'okela Award for Excellence in Literature and honorable mention, and is listed by Honolulu Magazine as one of Hawaii's essential books. His writing has appeared in numerous publications and anthologies, locally and elsewhere, including Story Quarterly, Everyday Fiction, and Rhino. In 2018, he was awarded the Elliott Cades Award for Literature, Emerging Writer, Hawaii's most prestigious literary award. He's currently an assistant professor of writing at Leeward Community College. His collection of short stories, Blood Work, and Other Stories is forthcoming from Bamboo Ridge. And he recently completed a near-future echo thriller. And there's a there's a code down there, right, if you want to pre-order Donald's upcoming books. So if you could welcome Donald Carrera Ching.
Good morning, everyone. It's Kaneohe, so of course it's raining today. I won't be reading just yet. I'll be introducing other folks, and then I'll read toward the end. I've been working with Bamboo Ridge Press since a long, long time. So I think 2009 or something like that is when I sort of first started out working with Bamboo Ridge as kind of a reader, and kind of getting involved with the press itself as kind of helping with events and doing all kinds of other wonderful things, grant writing at times. If you're not familiar with Bamboo Ridge Press has been around for 45 years. When Bamboo Ridge first came out, the idea of local literature or having writers who were from here is pretty much non-existent. The kinds of things that were being promoted in school were writers from elsewhere. And even when local artists and authors were being published or promoted in Hawaii, they were being paid less than those continental writers. And so, seeing that kind of just gap, Eric and Daryl, who founded Bamboo Ridge, created this press. And 45 years later, it's really the only press that regularly publishes fiction and poetry every single year. And it does it really for little to no money. It's a nonprofit. If you are interested in, reading or getting to know more of the writers you're going to meet today or become reacquainted with today, we have books in the back for sale. And you can let me know if you want to purchase one. Okay, great. And so today's mix was kind of brought about, it's work from the last 5 years, when a lot of these pieces and publications were coming out. It was after COVID. So a lot of the readings and events that we were holding were Zoom. And as many of you know, Zoom is not the most interesting and engaging platform for doing much. Certainly not for listening to reading, because then you just kind of zone out and you're not really paying attention. So hopefully today's event will kind of bring that work, give it the platform it deserves, and we'll have some fun as well today. And we have a big mix of writers today: poetry, fiction, all kinds of wonderful things. Okay, great. So our first writer that we're going to listen to from today, his work is from Kipuka, Finding Refuge in Times of Change. And this actually came out directly because of COVID. A lot of work that was being produced in this kind of reaction to that. So we're going to hear a little bit about that, as well as other things, the kinds of issues and problems that really face contemporary Hawaii. And I'm going to introduce him. Travis Kalalau Thompson, aka Travis T, is an award-winning Kanaka Korean spoken word poet and touring teaching artist from Kalihi, Honolulu, Oahu, Hawaii. As the only child of activist educators, he began performing his poetry at protest rallies and political demonstrations in the year 2000. A fixture in the Honolulu spoken word poetry community since 2003, he was a co-founder of the Reverses Poetry Collective, co-founder and director for the celebrated local youth literacy nonprofit known as Youth Speaks Hawaii Pacific Tongues, and is currently a founding member of the Chinatown Spoken Arts Collective known as the High Poets Society. Please welcome Travis.
Aloha mai kākou. My name is Travis Kalula Thompson. I come from Kalihi Valley, Honolulu, Oahu, Hawaii. And thank you for having me here today. I will be sharing with you 3 different poems from this book, Kipuka, which came out from Bamboo Ridge. And as much as I hate giving like backstories about every poem or whatever, I'll try and keep it short. But when we used to host poetry events before the pandemic, we would always say, no disclaimers, and tell people just let your poetry speak for itself. And by the way, I also wanted to, before I forget, let everyone know that there is an open mic, actually, a poetry open mic that is tonight. It is free. It is at 7 p.m. It is on Waialae Avenue in a second-story plant store called Plantoem, which is, plant plus poem is plantoem. And it could get hot in there, but, with the weather being the way it is, I'm sure it'll be fine, you guys. But it's a small plant store, so all of us would pack the place, easy, okay? And it's a really safe space, too, I think, for beginners especially. There's super encouraging audience, and the host is a really rad wahine. Okay. This first poem I'm going to share with you guys today is called Go Home, Stay Home. And it was written during the pandemic. And I wrote it with someone who was a coworker of mine. And when our school shut down, we had a lot of time to write poems, do any kind. And it was a great time for me as well because I had hosted poetry events weekly for years, like more than a decade kind. And so to all of a sudden bring that to an abrupt stop was like retirement, you guys. It was great not to have to go to events, organize events, all of that kind of stuff. But I sat down with my homegirl, Kameli Davidson, and we wrote this poem. This is about the pandemic. It's called Go Home, Stay Home. It goes, what, brah? What, brah? No can hear. What, brah? No like listen. I don't care if round trip tickets to Honolulu is only $115. Nearly 3 million people are sick. I don't care if that Airbnb in Lanikai was only $20 a night, brah. Over 200,000 people are dead. I don't care if you think this global pandemic is just a hoax engineered by China and the Democrats. 200 million people are living under a stay-at-home order, so go home, brah. Stay home. Hey, tourists, stay home. Hey, college spring breakers, stay home. All non-essential workers, stay home. After all, uninvited outsiders invading Hawaii has always been non-essential. Ever since Kanaka clubbed Captain Cook at Kealakekua Bay, outsiders invading Hawaii has always been about colonization, has always been about capitalist interests, has always been about stealing the land and kicking out Kanaka and turning our island into a parking lot for those willing to pay the price of paradise. But Hawaii is not your pandemic playground hideaway. Maybe you never hear when Governor Ige encouraged tourists not to travel to Hawaii at this time. Maybe you never listen when Mayor Caldwell encouraged all new arrivals to self-quarantine for 14 days. So we are here to make sure you hear us loud and clear. And we encourage you to go home, brah. Stay home. So excuse me if I seem upset at the image of outsiders landing at Honolulu Airport during a global pandemic. Excuse me if I seem heated at the broadcast of Trump selling lies about Lysol and UV flood-like enemas. That was a thing, you guys. Excuse me if I become triggered at the sight of body bags stacked on top of ice rinks because as a Kanaka, I will tell you, when outsiders invade Hawaii, it is we who have died in the hundreds of thousands, and we are not alone. For many Pacific Islanders throughout Oceania, the diseases of progress and travel are all too familiar to us. 1778 syphilis, 1804 cholera, 1820s influenza, 1839 mumps, 1848 measles, 1853 smallpox, 1869 leprosy, 2020 COVID-19. In less than 100 years of the arrival of the West, nearly 90% of our native population was Makidai dead. We chanted Kanikau and danced hula for the deceased, watching as our Ohana cliff jumped from Kaena Point, leaving footprints on the clouds at sunset to join our kupuna. But no longer shall we reserve our voices only for grieving, only for the dead. No longer shall we be silenced in the face of yet another deadly pandemic. No longer shall we listen to make nice, show aloha. So tourists, stay home, brah. College, spring breakers, stay home, brah. All invited outsiders and non-essential workers, stay home, you fucker. And all you racist invaders throughout Pacifica, know that you are not welcome, know that you are not wanted here, so go home and stay home, brah. Thank you. Oh, I normally don't swear in my poems. I was surprised I had that. Maybe that was ad-lib. Okay, 2 more poems. This one was before pandemic. I was on a poetry tour as part of the National Youth Poet Laureate Program. I was the director of the States program out of the Maui Arts and Cultural Center in Kahului on Maui. So a lot of flying because Zoom was back then what it is today, right? But because of this thing I was on a tour of all these different schools in Ohio, and I was in Toledo in March, which is cold, and there's ice on the roads. There's this thing called black ice that's on streets in the mainland, or anywhere there's snow, really, and it's dangerous, you guys. And you know how everybody slows down to like 40 miles per hour out here when it's raining? Oh yeah, when it's ice, like when it's black ice, that's advisable. Okay, 40, all right, and keep your 6, and you know what I mean, head on a swivel kind, don't be looking at your phone, all right? So it blew my mind, this thing, black ice, because all the streets are black because of the asphalt, all right. So I wrote this poem, my friend, who I made him drive everywhere when we was over there, because he's the one that invited us. Okay. It goes, somewhere outside, city streets are blanketed in sheets of black ice, melting drip by drip. The atmosphere is changing, drip by drip. Somewhere outside, the snow is melting for the last time, steaming into currents, lost in storm drains, gutters of sickness, spilling back to a dead sea, resurrected in fractions of inches, inviting itself inland, disappearing beaches. Somewhere outside grows a great Pacific garbage patch, twice the size of Texas. The fish are drowning in our undying plastic. Drips become ripples. Somewhere outside, climate refugees are running from the tide, chasing them to higher ground, while we ignore dripping faucets, wash our hands with blind faith in the market, flip carbon levels like condos, morals never mixed properly with money. The God we worship on our currency is the mirage of progress, answering us like the prayers of an atheist. Somewhere outside, thick breeze carries us like dry salt to vultures, scavenging the carcass of empire. Parasitic profiteers and bottom-line puppeteers prostitute our politics, so we are debtors to a system anchored like an oil rig to the ocean's basin. Meanwhile, real global terrorists scalp entire rainforests, decapitate mountaintops. Real global terrorists dam rivers for ransom, hold resources for hostage. Real global terrorists frack the seafloor in search of oil, pave cities over floodplains, because real global terrorists murder entire ecosystems. So catch your breath beneath the underbelly of our overconsumption. Cry me a merger when the rent's overdue. Oh, somebody just called me. Lyle Fujioka, I think he owns like a wine store. Brah, turn me off, brah. That was wild. Okay. What are the chances? And I have this theory that people only ever call me when I'm using both hands. Usually I'm doing yard work. Oh, call me back, bro, this guy, huh? Nuts. I don't owe you money, bro. Okay. Let me make this fast before he calls back, this fucker. All right. Real global terrorists murder entire ecosystems. So catch your breath beneath the underbelly of our overconsumption. Cry me a merger when the rent's overdue. Sing me a bedtime lullaby in a refugee tent. Alexa, wail me a blues song for gentrified graveyards rising from the dead like landfills the size of mountains. In the space between the Green New Deal and corporate interests, we become non-recyclable waste. Somewhere outside, polar bears cling to Arctic glaciers the size of ice cubes, sinking into extinction on Super Bowl Sunday. Somewhere outside, the ice is melting, dripping tears through generations of our children's unborn children. We are aborting our gardens of sustenance, modifying the genes of our seeds to feed coarse throats, but we can't nurse Mother Earth back to health if our bad credit can't afford her medical. Father Time has foreseen every disaster brewing and is turning his clock face backwards. All the cash in the world will never be enough to hold back the tide of our endgame, because hell will overheat before it freezes over, and soon none of us will have anything to do with folded paper in our pockets, but fan ourselves and pray for mercy from a world on fire, bloated from swallowing the sun. Thank you. So that's not a happy poem, per se, unless you're capitalist, maybe. And this last poem is actually, I wrote it in every March. I write poems dedicated to my father who died 10 years ago, 2015, March. And one of these poems got published. So it's in the book Kipuka. It's called Alone at Night. And it goes like this. I consider this a cunny cow. Alone at night on a beach with a shovel and a bottle of whiskey, I dug through the shallow sand until I broke through to the salt water below. And I took that as proof of life. Proof that I could still feel something. Proof that my heart still feels like the hills when a thunderstorm rolls in and pain unpacks its bags and settles to the shelter of my bones. Building like a flash flood, eventually crashing to a giant wave of debris, grief is striking upon the levees of my ribcage, and I screamed your name into the night, letting loose the house fire trapped within my throat, chasing after grief halfway down my spine, alone at night on the sea. I chummed the waters around my lifeboat and beckoned sea monsters with eyes older and colder than their blood. They came to me to sing siren songs, the kind that leave weary sailors lost at sea. But instead, I grabbed tight onto their tail fins, and I let them drag me beneath the surface to find you. But I did not find you, because I did not drown. Instead, I learned to walk on water, and though I never found my sea legs, I stutter-stepped my way into singing melancholy love songs, the kind the ocean can hear, sad songs that recall the rising tide in your lungs, how you were the sinking ship that no one could save. See, the ocean remembers, tells me that you had a voice the size of a barrier reef and a laugh as big as Maui, alone at night on Mauna Olamana. I watched how the Aina carries the bodies of the broken on its shoulders, reminding me that keeping my hurt in a cage, confined to the darkest corner of my mind, isn't called surviving. The weight of its burden bends my back like a rainbow to nowhere. On Mauna Olamana, the oldest trees whispered to me in the wind, Kaulula'au, there is a koa forest growing in your spine. And if you are still too small to breach the canopy, maybe you should never stop climbing. So every night, I went chasing the ghost of my father through hurricane-beaten coastlines of self, and my eyes never relented from star watch. Alone at night, with a blank page and a pen, I found you between the lines. So I made long-distance phone calls to the hole in my chest, where the last wheeze of a dying star echoed through the universe, masked by the sound of songs written in the coldness of once warm memories. Thank you. There's open mic tonight, 7 p.m. at Plantom on YLI. It's free. And free Palestine. Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. The thing I love about these kinds of readings is that you hear the way the poem comes to life. I think oftentimes you read it on the page, you miss the fact that poetry is born in the mouth, is born in the throat, and it's born through sound, and you can just hear that so beautifully and so viscerally in the performance. Our next performer, writer, hard to follow, is Sue Cowing. Sue Cowing lives in Honolulu, a stone's throw from Maungalua Bay, where she writes poems, fiction, and letters, but mostly poems. Congratulations and thanks to founders Eric and Daryl, all the rest for 45 years of quality publication. It's just in her bio, sorry. Sue.
I want to slow the last part of that introduction down a bit and say I'm really very, very grateful to be part of Issues of Bamboo Ridge, and I watched it from the beginning, and it's just a marvelous thing. And the main thing is it gives voice to writers here in the Pacific, and also literally gives voice, as you said, because poetry in particular needs to be heard out loud. Its sound is so important, and we don't always make those sounds when we read. My poems are a little gentler than the ones you just heard. And they deal with my experience on living on the Kaiwi coast and East Honolulu. I spent a lot of time near the water. But the first one takes place on the Big Island, or my imagination of it, and my fascination with the volcano. A door is open. A door is open, a lamp lit. That is how I think of it. Forgetting the door's a fissure, the lamp molten. I'm mesmerized by yellow rock in motion, glowing, flowing under black. I see this happening on television. Fear if I were there, I could lose all sense of danger, all memory of running footprints in cooled ash, and want to enter. Imagine stepping in, then in an instant, gone, cinderless, a hiss of steam, almost before you could feel that perfect burning. I live in a flood zone, and there's supposed to be something called the 100 Years Flood. In the time I've lived there, we've had 3 of them. And, seriously flooding the house, but here's one. After the 100 Years Flood, now the shrimp on the mountain are sleeping again, but we saw them, rare as comets, darting through an awakened meadow of native ferns we thought at first were long-stemmed 4-leaf clovers. It was just our luck, the year of the flood, the year waterfalls streamed down Cocoa Head, to live in the path between mountain and sea and take on water, while drought-adapted shrimp, asleep up there under kiawe scrub all along, doing a perfect imitation of crater dust, outweighted the enchantment of air, until the memory of ocean, the water standing on the mountain prophecy, should be fulfilled, then woke up mad to mate. What for us was all mud in the house and yard, disheartening ruin, for the shrimp was it, hen's teeth, blue moon, the hard to believe in 100-year prince's kiss, at last, wet and sexual. Years ago, not too many years ago, but it's not so long ago, there was a huge swell that came in just at the time of high tide, and it was really pretty dramatic, and so I wrote a poem about that. A swell weekend. A blessing, this historic South Shore swell that wipes out all our news, luring us from our screens and houses to the shore with nothing but ocean on our mind for once, its energy and power. Bless the seasoned surfers deciding not to enter, knowing as well what they cannot do as what they can, simply watching the giant waves with joy, with awe. Bless the foolish amateurs who plow right in, GoPros ready, seeing this as their one big chance. Bless the quiet watermen, alert to rescue them from broken boards and bones. Bless Rocky, who's known such swells before, calmly nursing her monk pup at Kaimana and teaching him how to be a seal. Soon we'll all get back to normal, I suppose, taking the ocean's gifts for granted once again, letting our flotsam and jetsam rush back in, wiping the salty sand from between our toes, and turning on the news. I have time to read another poem, and I've really debated which one to read. But I'm deciding to read one that I haven't ever read or published, and partly because its title had a polarizing word in it, and I thought once that title was read, nobody would read the poem, nobody would see what was in it. So I changed the title. And it's appropriate, I think, for this weekend and for what's happening with white Christian nationalism in our country. I wrote it when I was first beginning to see what those people were saying. It's called Teacher. Whether you see him as blonde and blue or black or brown with eyes like you, consider him Joseph's son or God's, joyously ignore the odds of miracles or wave them away, matters little compared to, say, the radical love he taught this earth, that every soul is of equal worth. If all are one, each one a brother, there can be no such thing as other. Just love to even the least of these. No strangers, no more enemies. Forgive and turn the other cheek, the very opposite of weak. Words spoken 2,000 years ago, do we realize them now? Suffer the little children, he said. Do we let little children suffer instead? Allow the hungry to go unfed? Whatever our chosen belief or creed, do unto others is love indeed. Thank you. The original title was Jesus Today. And I thought, no way, nobody's going to publish it, nobody's going to read it. Okay.
That wasn't the word I was expecting. It's amazing that love is political, yeah? Love is political then, love is political now. Yeah, crazy. Sue's work was in 124. This is the big issue. It's really big. One of the biggest issues that Bamboo Ridge has ever published. Our next reader also, his work comes from this particular issue, although I believe he's also going to be giving us some other pieces. Eric Paul Schaefer is an author of 7 poetry books, including Even Further West and $1 Million Bill. Green Leaves, Selected, and New Poems will appear, well, it appeared in 2023. Sorry, this is from 2024. 600 individual poems appear in reviews in America and 11 other countries. And Eric Paul Schaefer is retired, I believe now, yeah, from Honolulu Community College. Eric?
Aloha, and thank you for being here. I mean, I'm glad I'm here. Well, I don't know if you are, but yeah. So I was counting up the days the other day, and I was thinking, you know, most of the people who are going to be at this reading, you students, need to know how many days you have ahead of you. And you have a good number. If you live to be 81, you'll be 30,000 days long. Most of you are less than 10,000 days long. Look it up on the internet. You can find this stuff out. You can celebrate your 10,000th day. And I want you to, because I don't have that many ahead of me as I have behind me, right? If I make it to 30,000 days at 81 years old, I will be happy just for that. I wish you every lovely day you can have. So today I'm going to read 3 poems. The first 2 are going to be included in Bamboo Ridge 128, which hasn't come out yet, but I was already told they'd be in there. This one's called Once a Mango Tree, and let me give you a little background on this particular tree. You probably figured out already that 1,000 days is 3 years about, okay? And this mango tree and I were separated by a very narrow private lane between my house and the house of the lady who owned the mango tree. First time I ever brought a prop to a poetry meet. This is a leaf from that very mango tree. Thought I'd show it to you. It once really did exist. Because, you know, people are always saying, did that really happen? Yeah, this really happened. Once a mango tree. I miss the mango tree, cut from the neighbor's yard. Gone now for 1,000 days. I keep a single leaf retrieved that day from the lane between us on a shelf above my work. The leaf is brown and stiff, the only evidence of a mango tree once green and tall, yet I can still taste the ripe ones I found lying by the fence. Let me go out on a limb here and say nothing good ever came from chainsaws. And cutting down trees never made the world a better place to live. The street is hotter, the dogs have no shade, water bowls are dry in the sun. And someone's cutting down another tree today. The men sing as they work. Once in a while, I hold the leaf before my eyes close enough to eclipse my neighbor's house. Behind that single leaf in my hand, the mango tree lives on. While the crew slash at the tree today, dropping limb after limb, I wish that tree a dying triumph. Yet one more life is gone today. Some of the dead are trees, but I accept all the losses. The older I get, the more there is to lose. So every day, I practice opening my hands. You are so kind. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm not used to people applauding between poems because, you know, I don't want to know which ones you like the best, okay? That's what it comes down to. All right, let me give you some facts about the sun. The sun is a big ball of fire. The things you really need to know about it is that the light that you see coming down from the sun takes 8 minutes to get here from the surface. That's an important fact. It also takes the photons that consist of that light 10,000 years to get from the center of the fusion to the surface of the sun. That's like a long time, right? Yeah. It's a lot of time for light to be bouncing around off other light inside a big old burning sphere. So now that you know all that, check this out. A tree newly planted in the islands at the end of the world. I'll plant this tree and water the roots, weeping. My salt will not nourish the future, but grief, like rain, seeks the earth. Sad black crescents of dirt will rise beneath my nails, revealing again how the work of our own hands graces us with soil. This tree will grow well beyond my life. These leaves will gather light born in the heart of our sun 10,000 years ago, vaulting from that radiant surface to this in 8 minutes. I will never know 10 millennia inside an orb of only light, but I can understand a few minutes of crossing darkness before joining the explicable chemical mix of green and wind, root and limb. Water nourishes what we plant in the rays from above. Yet light does not fall. Light rises from a core burning for billions of years to an edge we'll never see, even with all this light. The ground glows around my shadow as I bury new roots, meaning more than this day ever will. Light needs no meaning, but I do. So I will follow water into the earth, compose and decompose as time ensues, even as the planet rotates and revolves and whirligigs through the galaxy. Even as the islands flourish and fail around us, I can add no more. This is the poem that was included in the issue that Don was talking about, number 124. It was when it started to become excessively clear to me that the world was changing into something else and that America was changing into something else. And this is my poem of requiem for the nation. Let me tell you a few things about the words in here. Bane means a bad thing. Loose leaf sheet, about that big, in a binder. Remember those? Cable spool table, well, you know, wire for telephone lines used to be spooled up on this big, old, huge thing. And when it was empty, dumbasses like me would go and get one and use it for a kitchen table in the apartment while we were going to college. Did you have one of those, Susan? Did you? Colors is another name for the flag, the United States flag. Another name for the United States flag, Old Glory. And finally, pyre is a fire which we light to burn the dead. And a lath is a piece of wood, very, very long, but thin, like a paint stirring thing, so that you'll know what I mean when I get to those words. Ceremony in the American twilight. In college, I lived in a house with too many roommates. We were the bane of the neighbors with our loud late nights of rock, our unmown yard of grass long gone to seedy stalks, our primered cars of blown mufflers and blue exhaust. One afternoon, one of us half-baked rebels tacked an American flag the size of a loose leaf sheet to the wall above a ragged couch, cinder block bookshelves, and cable spool tables. From another life, I knew when to raise and lower the colors, how to hang, fold, and drape the flag, all the regulations governing the cloth we live and die for. That night, after the rest passed out or crawled to bed, I couldn't sleep. I snuck into the living room and reversed the colors, placing the blue properly on the left. Through the long days of the semester, the flag hung, pinned and rippling in the occasional breeze from the open front door, forgotten. The holidays came. The roommates dispersed. Some were gone for good and more were coming. The flag was in tatters, and whoever was left last tore the colors from the wall. I found the flag in the kitchen trash and fished the cloth from eggshells and orange peels. As light faded, I found an empty coffee can 3 short, broken laughs, a wad of newspaper, a book of matches. Outside, the sun was gone. Clouds blackened the horizon, and the blue was tempered with twilight. In the backyard, I constructed my pyre, dropped a match into the can, and watched flames wave at the sky. In one hand, I held the tired flag, and I gazed into the fire. "What you doing?" said a small voice from beyond the chain-link fence. The old woman next door was barely visible, seated in a rocker on her back porch. Caught, I blew all my breath into the rising shadows and said, "Burning the flag?" adding apologetically, "It's old." A vague shape in the gloom, she paused long and then spoke a single word: "Glory." She surprised a laugh from me, but I had no more words. The fire in the coffee can was snapping and glad. In the dusk, I squatted over oily earth and gray cinders, the glitter of shattered beer bottles, and fed the cloth into the flames. The light within showed broad bars of red and white, brilliant again when the fire caught. Night was coming. From the faded blue field, orange sparks rose into the darkening sky and became stars. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to read next, and it's weird to have multiple introductions, so we're gonna jump straight into it. I'm going to be reading a piece that was originally published in Snaring New Suns. It's about speculative work, so near future, which means like 10, 20 years, although speculative, we could sit here for 6 semesters and not quite have a clear definition on it maybe. But it's since been revised and kind of reworked, and it's now the first story in my collection of short stories that will be out in June. And if you're interested in learning more about that or learning more about the writers and work that Bamboo Ridge Press does, again, in the back, there's actually a sheet with QR codes. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can pre-order that, my collection, as well as there's lots of books if you want to purchase as well. I'm not going to give too much context for this because I'm going to start at the beginning, essentially. But a lot of my work deals with Windward Oahu, Kahaluu, Kaneohe. This piece in particular is the only one from the collection that's not on the windward side, not in Ko'olaupoko. It's features mainly in Waikiki, and that was really for very intentional purposes, but mainly because as the start of my collection, I was very much aware of the fact that Waikiki stands as this kind of symbol of like tourist paradise, and so I really wanted to have my collection to knock that down, essentially, and kind of start us off. And so we'll kind of go from there. And it's also inspired by a Civil Beat put out a article back in 2019 where you could like type in your address and then you could use a little scroll bar at the top. And as you went down the years, you could see the ocean slowly swallowing the land. And it was about sea level rise. And so it was actually inspired by that. And I hate microphones. I'm going to intentionally talk slowly because I talk very quickly. Let me know if you can't hear me. That's why I'm always like mixing things up and never pronouncing anything correctly. Okay. Search the waters. They said it would be years, and then the storms hit. The tsunamis came, and the seawalls fell. Mamala Bay swallowed Waikiki and met the Alawai, and $1 million couldn't buy you a breath on Ala Moana Boulevard. On the other side of the island, in Ohuimanu, the damage hadn't been as bad, but that didn't matter to Ka'imi. He'd been born on the beach, his mother giving birth to him during a birthday party at Kualoa, had lived his life on the water as a boy, learning to paddle with his father, throwing net with his sister, then later a tour of Vietnam with the Navy before driving boat as a captain for the fire department. So he knew what he had to do. After the reports of what had happened came in, he hiked over Pu'umaeleele, taking with him food, water, and 2 containers of gas. It took him an hour to make it down to where he had hauled his boat ashore, a parcel of state land that his friend had managed for years. From there, he navigated out through the capsized hulls and jutting masts of what was once He'eakea Pier, and out onto Kaneohe Bay. By the time he rounded Leahi, the sun was on the horizon, casting the scene in front of him in a bloom of red. A few hotels stood stoic above the flood, but the older ones were halved or disappeared completely, gutted and toppled over like offerings to the sky, while storefronts and blown-out windows formed a coast of cavities. The streets were a reef of abandoned cars. Helicopters and drones flew overhead, but it was the bodies that made him cut the motor, each one a dull thud against the hull. When one of the fireboats came around to ask him what he was doing there, he flashed the dog tags around his neck and lied, "I'm here to help." They turned him away, told him it wasn't safe, but he didn't care. He anchored and waited, listening to coverage from the scene on his radio. The rescue efforts continued into the night, but by that time, Ka'imi had put on his old firefighter jacket and was able to slip his boat into the chaos. It was difficult to hear anything above the noise of chopper blades, boat engines, and bullhorns. But as Ka'imi navigated away from the luxurious rubble along Kalakaua Avenue and down the side streets, now waterways, he could make out screams and cries for help. He had brought night vision goggles, a swap meet treasure, and used them to sift through the shades of green, the dead or the dying lost in the emerald black around him while the living dotted the windows above. Still, he kept to the water, searching for those left to fend for themselves in the flood. The first person he pulled on board was James Jimmy Cross. Jimmy had been living in Waikiki for 3 years. He was a retired stevedore and was still collecting the checks they sent to his P.O. box. He had a house and a wife, and then he didn't. A drunk driver took his wife. The bank took his house. He couldn't live there anymore, so why pay? Now it was just him and his Jenny girl. Ka'imi gave him a blanket and opened an MRE. "What happened?" he asked. "Cops went sweep the park, arrest me, try to tie her up. Then the sirens went go off, but it was too late, yeah? I went yell, 'Go, Jenny girl, go!' But she never liked. Then, everything water. And Jenny girl? She stay out there," Jimmy insisted. But if there was one thing that Ka'imi hadn't seen breathing yet, it was a dog. Ka'imi stuck to the areas he knew. Most tourists had heeded the warnings and had gone to their hotel rooms or to the rooftops. Locals had found themselves in traffic only to abandon their cars and scramble on foot, yet some stayed. "Where was I supposed to go?" Lei asked him. She was new to the streets, lost her job and ended up in Kaka'ako. Like Jimmy, the sweeps took most of what she owned, so she moved. She figured at least there were showers, the beach, places to clean up and to keep clean. I tried the hotels, but was madness. When I got to the door, they said, "Guests first," like they don't have the room. Ka'imi found her lying out on a McDonald's sign, a cigarette in one hand, her arm dangling between the arches. Now she was gulping down a bottle of water and eating chips with a pair of chopsticks she retrieved from her hair. "I came back, a bunch of us did. But you know what? They had locked the doors." He had heard the same thing already. At first, he wasn't sure if he believed it. Then he found a valet who hadn't made it in on time. He got stuck on his way to the parking garage. By the time he ran back, all he found were sandbags blocking the doors. "Where was I supposed to go?" Lei asked for the 3rd time. Ka'imi didn't have an answer, but he knew they hadn't all been like that. Some hotels kept their doors open all the way until the first wave hit. A woman from Tacoma told him that she had been the last one in, that she had turned around and saw the water rushing down the street like rapids down a canyon. "Right then, I saw God's face in the flood." "Did you pray?" One of the other passengers, a teenager with a New York accent and little tact, asked. I ran, she laughed, until she had to wipe her eyes. She was on the 3rd floor when the water rushed over her head. Thankfully, I found a window. Ka'imi kept at it, pulling people up and taking them to rescue services or helping them trawl the water for people they knew. He barely rested, taking short naps only when his vision started to blur or his hands couldn't hold the steering wheel steady. By the 3rd day, one of the firefighters had given him a radio and he started to coordinate pickups, but those occasions became rarer and rarer. Then, on the 5th day, they gave him a helmet and an axe. He anchored his boat and started to join the efforts inside the buildings. He was part of Station 7 again, where he had worked when he first started out. In the breaks between light and darkness, when the spaces were filled with nothing but smoke and ash, he felt those ghosts come back in tremors and small gasps of breath, and he thought of what brought him there in the first place. Breaks were brief. Every second was a second too long, so he continued to break down doors and drop into flooded hallways. When he pulled bodies out, he followed procedure, he did what he could, and he moved on to the next section to be cleared. But before he tagged the X code on the outside of the room or in front of the hole in the floor, he took the time to really look at the faces, just in case someone asked him if he had seen a mother, a son, a friend. Just in case it was his daughter he was holding but didn't recognize, but it never was. And I'll leave the story there. Sorry. It's hard to clap, yeah, after such a depressing story. Although, with this collection of stories, there's a lot of darkness, but I've tried to give happy endings, I guess you can call them. And if you want to know how the story ends, you can, again, pre-order the collection. A lot of the sort of themes have kind of had, been rooted in truth, rooted in real events. And, I mentioned the Civil Beat article, but a lot of what is kind of discussed in the sense of the disaster and the flood was rooted in stories of Hurricane Katrina. Okay, and our last reader is Thomas Gamarino. Come on, Tom. Oh, God. Hold on. Sorry, bear with me. He is the author of novels King of the Worlds, The Lost Years of Dylan Green, and Big in Japan, A Hungry Ghost Story, and the novella Jellyfish Dreams. Recent shorter works have appeared in Tahoma Literary Review, Hawaii Pacific Review, Entropy, The Writer, and American Short Fiction. In 2013, he received the Elliott Cades Award for Literature, and he teaches English at Punahou School. And just a great guy. Knew him in grad school. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, everybody, and thank you, Don, for the introduction and inviting me here. I feel really humbled by all that work. It's great stuff. I'm looking forward to your collection, Don. That didn't work at all. Is this the way? 1 second. All right, I'm just going to lean over. That'll work. Ordinarily, I'm mainly a fiction writer. But I'm not going to read fiction today. I'm going to read an essay that I haven't reread since it was published, as far as I can remember. And this was published back in 2021, I believe. So I guess I wrote this about 5 years ago. And I'm aware that I've changed a lot in the last 5 years in ways that would be hard to quantify. I just feel like a different person. Maybe that's true every 5 years. Maybe that's true for everyone. But I am curious to see how this is going to sound even to me as I read it. I think I probably mostly agree with my former self, but we'll find out. As Don mentioned, I teach at Punahou, and mostly I teach science fiction, and I've been doing that for most of my career there, about 15 years. So this is kind of about that. It's called Dystopia in Paradise. There's an epigraph from Aldous Huxley's novel Brave New World, quote, "And if ever by some unlucky chance anything unpleasant should somehow happen, why there's always Soma to give you a holiday from the facts." Soma is the perfect drug in Brave New World, if you haven't read the book. It's like Christianity and alcohol without the side effects. Here we go. A quick search on the word paradise in the online yellow pages for Honolulu. My peas are really popping, huh? I'll stand back. Can you hear me okay? Cool. In the online yellow pages for Honolulu pulls up 269 businesses. Among them, Sushi Paradise, Picnics in Paradise, Paradise Eyewear, Paradise Rent-A-Car, Paradise Jerky, Cheeseburger in Paradise, Paradise Barbershop, Paradise Carpet and Tile, Paradise Thai Massage, Paradise Tanning, Paradise Media Group, Paradise Auto Specialists, Paradise Ice, Paradise Lua, Toilets, Paradise Dollar Store, even Paradise Mortgage, as if that weren't a contradiction in terms. The same search on my hometown of Philadelphia pulls up 143 businesses, but since those results encompass a metro area with over 6 times the population of the entire island of Oahu, the disparity is telling, if not exactly surprising. Everyone knows that paradise is what tourists come to Hawaii for. I'm not sure anyone has ever traveled to Philadelphia for that. If tourists on Oahu ever leave the 3-mile stretch of beach called Waikiki, it's generally to go snorkeling in Hanauma Bay, or maybe shopping in Haleiwa, the surfers' Shangri-La on the North Shore. Perhaps they visit Pearl Harbor, hike Diamond Head, or attend a luau in Paradise Cove. Odds are sharply against their venturing to the leeward side of the island, where they'd be forced to reckon with the tent cities that house many of Oahu's 5,000 homeless people. And there's approximately no chance that they'll take the time to learn the difficult history of these islands, from missionaries bringing their creeds in pandemics, to sugar magnates and foreign politicians illegally annexing a sovereign nation and placing a beloved queen under house arrest, to military occupation, overdevelopment, human trafficking, a meth pandemic, a housing shortage, and the ongoing extinction of countless species. And who can blame them? Most of these tourists don't come here to be in Hawaii so much as Hawaii, the paradise that exists foremost in their minds. I demarcated that difference in pronunciation just with the okina and quotation marks. Hawaii is a reward for all the time they've clocked working in their techno-industrial metropolises, an exotic pastoral from the real world, and as long as they keep forking over dollars, they can stay in that virtual reality program as long as they like, gawking at fire dancers and drinking from coconuts. I teach Aldous Huxley's dystopian novel Brave New World in my science fiction class at a private high school in Honolulu. I usually begin by asking students who among them would like to live in the blissed out, instant gratification society Huxley conjures in his novel. In a class of 20, about 80% say no. Even if I could wipe their memories so that they knew nothing of the world they were leaving behind, they want to believe they would despise living in such a place. But guaranteed happiness, I say, and soma, the perfect drug with no side effects. The 2 or 3 students who didn't do the reading raised their eyebrows, but my provocations fail to move any of the nays. I push to learn what values these students prioritize over happiness, and they say things like meaning, or it's all about the struggle. Some want to distinguish between bodily pleasure and true happiness. I ask if they don't think these are just the sorts of things unhappy people might say if they were trying to justify their way of being to themselves. They confess it's possible. On the other hand, I wonder if I might get different answers were I teaching students in different geographic and or socioeconomic contexts. How much struggle can a person take before faith in the redemptive value of suffering begins to erode? These are not rhetorical questions, but I don't know the answers. At this point, I usually draw a connection to The Matrix. In that film, Neo faces a choice between the red pill and the blue pill. That is, living in the real world, where happiness is far from guaranteed, or in a satisfying simulation. Insofar as the analogy to Brave New World holds, my students are consistent. Nearly all of them want the red pill. Then I strip away the science fiction trappings and recall a conversation I once had with a stranger on a plane. Let's say you've been married 20 years and couldn't be happier. Now let's say your partner has been secretly meeting with your best friend 4 days a week for 19 of those years. Do you want to know that? The red pill contingent, more or less to a person, say they would want to know. They value truth over happiness, they say. Some part of me wants to claim that in my 40-something wisdom, I've come to understand that happiness is hard won, and as long as I'm smiling, leave me be. After all, physicists tell us most of the universe is made up of dark matter and dark energy, and we know almost nothing about those. What's one more little unknown about the universe? But that's bad faith. When push comes to shove, I too would want to know, would still subordinate happiness to the pursuit of aligning my life in as much as possible with objective reality. If I'm going to live inside a mental construct premised on a fiction, a simulacrum, virtual reality, Soma holiday, then I at least want to know that. Brave New World suggests that utopia is always in the eye of the beholder. But that doesn't keep Huxley from rhetorically implying judgment of his utopian's false consciousness. The central tension for Huxley, as signaled by the novel's epigraph, is between freedom and perfection. If those are mutually exclusive, which do you want? Before rushing to judgment, recall that, as world controller Mustafa Mond reminds us, freedom necessarily encompasses, quote, the right to grow old and ugly and impotent, the right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow. Lousy, by the way, louse is the plural of lice, that is to have ukus. The right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. And what about those 20% of my students who have no desire to be martyrs for truth? The blue pill poppers who subordinate all other values to happiness. My hope, perhaps naive, is that this is a false binary, that as social creatures, our own happiness depends upon the flourishing of our communities, and my hedonistic students are simply too young to have had their beliefs tested in the field. I submit that one calculus for determining how post-human we are not is to invoke the degree to which the suffering of others still cuts into our own happiness. Alas, Ursula K. Le Guin's much anthologized short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, suggests I am indeed naive. In the story, the happiness of a utopia depends on everyone's knowing that a malnourished, naked child sits in excrement in a dark cellar beneath their splendid city. Nearly everyone goes with the program, accepting the sacrifice of the wretched one as a necessary evil. The analogy to hypercapitalism seems obvious. But if I'm naive, I'm at least not alone. Occasionally, a citizen of Omelas, rejecting the social contract, walks out of Omelas for good. Rousing though that citizen's resistance is, however, I can't help thinking mere conscientious objection is a cop-out, a sort of denial or virtue signaling that in fact does nothing to ease the child's suffering or uproot the sadism or schadenfreude of the society that depends on it. N.K. Jemisin offers a complex rebuttal to Le Guin's story with her own The Ones Who Stay and Fight. In the author's tweeted words, the story is, quote, an argument for action rather than complacency or escapism in the face of injustice. Interpret it however you like, end quote. To be sure, 127 years after annexation, Hawaii is too complex to admit of easy solutions to the legacy of empire. It's easy enough for me to write critically of unreflective tourists, but the truth is I struggle every day with my own identity as a non-native teacher in Hawaii and with what it means or should mean for me to love this place as I do. Should I be the spoil sport who attempts to disabuse vacationers of the belief that they're enjoying themselves? Given that tourism is Hawaii's top industry, I'm honestly not sure. But then capitalism may well be the root of the problem. In any case, a recent back and forth in the media seems to me instructive. On June 28, 2019, the New York Times published an article on race in Hawaii, bearing the unfortunate title, "Want to be less racist? Move to Hawaii." In her response on her blog, scholar Akiemi Glenn included an image of the article redacted by community members on social media. The new title read, "Want to be less racist? Visit Hawaii. Learn from Hawaii, contribute to Hawaii, then please leave Hawaii." parentheses, unless you are willing to commit to help repair, restore, and regenerate our peoples and places, then we can begin a dialogue. As every tourist knows, aloha means hello, but as in Queen Liliuokalani's most famous song, Aloha Oe, it also means goodbye. Maybe sometimes walking away is the best way to stay and fight. Thank you. Oh, I just want to mention, too, that I had the privilege, thanks to Don, of editing this issue, the speculative issue of Bamboo Ridge. And this, I just never saw this coming. You know, back when I moved here in 2006, I knew about Bamboo Ridge, and I didn't think I'd ever be published in it, let alone editing a volume. So thanks so much for that. It was a joy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that. Was a really wonderful, mixed plate. We have a few minutes. I mean, I didn't ask the writers, but this is okay to have some questions? Yeah. Okay. So if anyone has a question for any of the writers, Sue, Donald, Eric, and Tom, and Travis, please.
Tom, you wonder what it would sound like years later? How would it sound?
Pretty good. I'll sign off on that, actually. Yeah. I was less nauseated than I expected. I heard a writer one time say, it was the writer Paul Theroux. He's a polarizing figure in his own right. But he said once that with every book he burns up a self. And I find it very hard to read most of what I do. Very often I feel like, I don't even recognize this person. Occasionally I can endorse stuff he wrote, but it's not me exactly.
Work on that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you were very good 5 years ago. But you made
I know, I'll know in 5 years.
5 years. And a question for you, Travis. Was the third poem you read, was that the published one you read? I know it's only easier.
Yeah, Alone at Night. I think it's Ink.
Oh, thank you. Good, thank you.
I just wanted to say one thing before we break, though, is I spent a lot of time in this library when I was in grad school, and it was not new, but it was newish. And I just want to let you know, unless you've seen some of the other libraries in the university system, this is where it's at, you guys. And on the 3rd floor, against the last window, I mean, I know all the signs say don't move furniture. But if you just scoot a desk over like 5 feet, it's still plugged into the wall, and you get 2 views. Right? You get one Mauka, and you get one Makai. And if you don't bother nobody, no one's going to say, hey, move your desk, bro. This is just a great library. It's an awesome space. Just wanted to thank all of you guys for having us here today.
I had a question for all the writers. What does your writing mean to you, and what do you think you contribute to your community by publishing these pieces or sharing them to the world?
I mean, I got my start in spoken word poetry, and I started that because of activism. And hearing activists get up and do announcements that were so boring. They talk about real issues that need to be heard. They shut you off. And I was like, bro, 3 minutes or less, I bet you, right? And make it emotional, please. So I've always been a writer for an audience, which is not, I find, how a lot of people come to writing. A lot of people come to writing for themselves, through a diary, through collecting their own thoughts, which I think is so super valuable. It is maybe the most important part of writing, is just being able to organize your thoughts on a surface. Right? All the brilliant things you could say if you just gave it another look, right? And so I've always thought that, artists for the masses, and, the purpose of art is to make revolution, and inspire people, and I still think all of that, but I've come around to the other side too now, where I just write for what I'm saying. And if it helps someone else, that's great.
Maybe. Medication therapy helps too.
That's a really great question. And, you know, I think when I was listening to the readings, there's a connection between the facts to the spirituality, and it seems like it kind of makes that sort of holistic turn. Sue, did you have a response?
Yeah, I just wanted something, I've always loved to write, and I write to find out what I think. And I have a belief that whenever anyone is using their creativity, and we all have more than we think we have, that they're making a contribution automatically, whether they know it or not. It's sort of a mystical idea. But during COVID, if you remember during shutdown, when there was no treatment, we didn't even understand how it spread. There certainly was no vaccine, and there was no idea how long this was going to go on. And people were just so, and I live on a circle, and people were walking around the circle every day, walking their dogs, walking their kids, riding their bikes, just to do something. I thought, we need some poetry here. So I had a friend build a poetry box. It's hard to describe, but it's like a post box with a window that I could put a poem in and take it out. And so 2 or 3 times a week, I would put a poem in that box. About a third of them were my own poems, and 2/3 poems I liked by other people. And from the beginning, my thought was, the main thing is I'm not teaching, I'm not impressing anybody. The main thing we need to do is connect. And I realized that the people who are walking around are people who don't necessarily read poetry. So that's what governed my choice of what to put in there, things that would connect with people. And it got to be like checking the nail. I hear somebody call, hey, there's a new one. So, and I'm still doing it. I'm in about, I think I posted 667 this morning. And that for me has been, because I got to know my neighbors in ways that I hadn't, just hello, nice people, whatever. But people would come up and talk to me about the poems. And there was this beautiful dog, incredible dog on the circle. It was everybody's consolation during COVID, old dog, and just had lessons to teach. And that dog died, and I wrote a poem for it. And I put the poem out, I came back later, and there were 2 lays hanging over the box. So it just kind of brought the neighborhood together, which was exactly, when people were feeling so isolated. So it's been a very satisfying kind of publication, a use of poetry.
Well, I think that brings us moving to a close. And, there's the back table, and there's also the QR code, and the writers, if you want to chat for a little bit, they'll be here. And thank you so much for coming, and thank you for supporting literature, listening to so many different voices. Thank you again.